This is the Go Podcast.
Hello and welcome back to Series 2 of the Go Podcast. We're joined today by another seasoned regular of the show, a favourite from the last season. I think you'll instantly recognise her voice when she comes on. But of course today we're covering Liverpool, my team and her team as well. So we're delighted, without further ado, Jack, to introduce Izzy Baldwin to the show.
Yeah, welcome Izzy. I feel like I might be a little bit of a third wheel again today, with it being Liverpool Tom. But you know, we'll see as it goes on. But yeah, Izzy, did you get a win in the first series? I'm struggling to remember now. I should have really prepared this before.
Let's get this record straight, please, Jack. I made 2 appearances in the first series and won both of them.
So 100% record.
100% record.
The best win ratio in the league.
I know, I've kind of set myself up there now. I can't disappoint now.
Yeah.
We thought of doing a leaderboard at one stage, didn't we? With like points per game.
Sky Sports style, yeah. I mean, Elizabeth had a few wins, but she had a few more appearances, so I think Izzy might be the only one with 100% win ratio. But anyway, we'll look into that. We'll delve into the archives for that.
Well, I think it's quite interesting you mentioned about I think it was the European Cup episode where you felt very outnumbered, really, didn't you, Jack? Because I think it was basically
the Liverpool army,
suggestions on the day.
Liverpool, different generations of Liverpool European Cup winning teams, and I was just propping up the podcast with AC Milan. But yeah, that was good. I'm looking forward to hearing your choices today, Izzy, because you're obviously a massive Red like Tom, and I mean, it feels like a different world now. But one of my favourite moments when we were all working back in the journalism office pre-COVID was when a photo came up of you two at the Merseyside derby together, singing along to Divock Origi chants. So
and it looked like I was singing the wrong words.
It did.
You were both singing in perfect harmony. I couldn't help but be impressed with that.
You could see just like the passion on our faces while we were really going for that song. It wasn't a little sing-along. We were committed on the cut and everything.
It was a bit of a classic, that game, because we were both in the ground at the point, and you look at it now where obviously you can't get to the game anymore.
It's true.
And I think it'll go down as a real classic, that game, because I think
in terms of Merseyside derbies in the last 5, even 6 years, they've been mainly boring affairs, a 0-0, a 1-0, but that was really something. I remember turning to you at one point, I think it's after we got our third on, and I turned to you, I was like, is this really happening? Like, you almost didn't believe it. It felt like a real... Well, it was one of the most passionate Merseyside derbies we've had in a long time, I'd say.
Yeah, as you could see written on our faces, I think, when we came on the match of the day later in the night. I couldn't believe that when I seen it. I couldn't believe that. You just reminded me of that.
The group chat.
Oh, it went wild, didn't it? Yeah, so that was our first kind of starring moment, really, wasn't it, Izzy? I think on the big screen.
It's the first, but I hope not the last time I make it on Sky Sports. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I'd like to think so. So yeah, obviously, what have you made then of this season? Because we speak about sort of being in the ground and that atmosphere and an amazing game. It's been a complete contrast, really, this year, hasn't it? In many ways.
Yeah.
How have you kind of found it this year?
And we were discussing this a bit before, weren't we? And I don't know whether this makes me a bad football fan, but for me this season, I've lost, not all, but a little bit of joy watching football. It just, I mean, they're trying, these are unprecedented times, keep phrase there, but they've tried their best to still capture and still be able to provide us with sport, which obviously fans like us, I don't know how we'd actually get through lockdown without sport, but it's just not the same. And I'm noticing it more now this new season than I was at the end of last season. And I don't know whether that's just because I'm a Liverpool fan and obviously this season hasn't been as good for us. But it's just lost a bit of the joy and a bit of a passion for me. But you know, still love it, still going to support my team no matter what, and hopefully after last night's performance we're on the up again.
Yeah, I mean, we at the point of recording, we've just been through, I think, our worst ever spell since about, I think it was 2000. Someone pointed out, and it was pretty dismal, to be honest. It
5
was,
games
I think,
without a goal.
Yeah, and it was difficult to watch, even in the general malaise that seems to be sort of surrounding football at the moment. What have you kind of found with it, Jack, as a Newcastle fan as well? Obviously, your team's known for that atmosphere in the ground and stuff as well. You must be missing it equally as well.
Yeah, well, it's funny that Izzy said that, because actually I feel completely the same way. I'm still watching games, obviously, all the time. You know, it would be weird if I wasn't, I think. But there's something that it is a bit soulless without the fans. And obviously, I mean, that's stating the obvious. But I agree that there was something about Project Restart and getting last season finished was the right thing to do, and that had to be done behind closed doors, which I could get into it then. But starting this season without fans has just been, I do find it a really difficult watch. And also, I mean, hopefully, I do believe there's light at the end of the tunnel, and you never know, we might get some fans back in before the end of the season. And I'd like to think whoever wins the league this year will be able to celebrate it properly, and have the normal. And obviously, you guys will still be waiting on your open top bus tour that Klopp's promised from last summer, and rightly so.
2025,
and that's right. And yeah, but I don't think hopefully we'll have to wait that long. But I agree. It's there's something about going to the match, isn't there, that we all just we love, and it's hard to keep watching. But you're still in the race, so things to be positive about, and
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing better than, I'm sure it's the same for you at the Gallagher, but I think there's nothing better for us than standing on the cop, I think, like Izzy alluded to before. And it's something I'm really missing, but thankfully on the Go podcast, it's kind of time immemorial in a way, and we can look back on
it's a nice time to dive back into the archives, I think, and go through history, because
absolutely.
It suits the lockdown, really.
I agree.
So,
we can't talk about current sport, let's reflect on the glory days.
It's been the best thing about the Go podcast, I think, that we've been able to sort of not look at the sport of today and sort of reacquaint ourselves with what it used to be like. But I think it's probably time now, Lacey, for us to dive into the big item of the day, really. We're going to have to crown, by the end of the episode, a greatest Liverpool footballer of all time, and thankfully we've got Izzy here to help us along the way. So who have you kind of factored into your thinking for today?
I feel like the greatest player is a no-brainer for me, because, and I'm sure everyone will probably have had the same player in mind. I went with King Kenny Dalglish. For me, like, King Kenny was just in a class of his own. Before my time, I never obviously got to see King Kenny play, way before our time, but he's just such an icon at the club. I think he is one of the greatest players to ever play the game, never mind play for Liverpool Football Club. He came in 1977, made 501 appearances for the club, and scored in a grand total of 169 of those games. So that's a pretty impressive record, but he's quite a unique player in the sense that, we just mentioned how many games he scored in, but that's actually not why I've picked him, because he didn't take so much joy in being the one to always score the goals, but rather that he always took himself out of the glory and made those around him look better, gave them the chances. Like, in a sense, he was a real team player. He wasn't selfish like a lot of strikers are that we know today, especially. Won't go naming names, but we all know. But also, it's not just his record as a player. I think he went on to become player manager, and in that role, he won 3 First Divisions, 2 FA Cups, and I want to say 4 FA Charity Shields. Before resigning in 1991, and one of the big things for me in this decision, again, not just about his skills as a player, but was, unfortunately, it's a tragedy, but it was the Hillsborough disaster. And that's what cemented King Kenny as part of the Anfield family. I don't know if the club would have been able to get through that disaster without him at the helm. He attended the funerals of the victims, I think including 4 in one day at one point. And his presence in the aftermath, it was heroic, it was colossal. Without that presence, I don't know if we would have got through it as well as we did. So I know technically this category is the greatest player and not an all-round icon, you know, but his playing career on its own, I think, is testament enough to his ability to be considered for this category, but also that beyond his playing career, this Dalglish legacy is so interwoven in the history of the club, and really I think is a foundation for the soul and, you know, the heart of Anfield and the club as itself. So for that reason, player, manager and icon, it's got to be Kenny Dalglish for me.
He's done it all, hasn't he? And I think
he has.
Yeah.
You can't fault him.
Yeah. I mean, I love looking at him now as well, as sort of, he's an older statesman now of the game, really, isn't he? And he's been honoured in that way by the club and further afield as well. But I think, like you say, that I think the big one, even beyond the playing career, like you say, with, you know, he's a world-class player, and the amount of trophies he won with that side through the 70s and 80s is the impact in the Hillsborough disaster, and he kind of guided the club through that like no one else ever has, I think, for any football club really. And I think that he deserves praise, even, you know, as a person, I think, beyond football. And I think to, you know, take on the strain of a whole city and beyond the city as well, you know, you could see on his face, I think, in the years after, you know, the impact it had on him. And I think it ultimately, I think you said there about him resigning in, I think it was 91 you said, and, you know, I think people often say about that, don't they, that it, you know, ultimately did come down to that, the pressure and
the strain
you know, the strain of that disaster on the club. And I think it hung over Liverpool as not just a club but as a city for 20 odd 30 years really. And I think that, you know, he's somebody who was focal in guiding us through that, and I think that Izzy's completely correct in saying that as a player, manager, and even, you know, as an icon, more accurately probably. I think you're spot on really. There's not many people who'd argue against it as a point of view.
Yeah, I did think that. I mean, it's the obvious choice, like I said. So, like, and I don't know whether that makes me a good guest or a bad guest for going for the obvious choice. But when it came down to that one, there was no real thought process. It just had to be him.
I mean, on our Everton episodes, Izzy, and Jack will tell you as well, we had all 3 guests pick the same player, so I wouldn't
really?
I wouldn't put yourself down too much. But
yeah, it's interesting, if anything, the consensus across fans who, like, we've asked different people this question and if they're coming up with the same answers. But I kind of, coming into this as an outsider, obviously, I thought that it is an interesting debate, the Liverpool player, but I think there's nothing I could argue in terms of one man's impact on a club. It's just, Dalglish is just untouchable, isn't he? And I think as well, what I like about him as a selection is that, and I'm guilty of this myself as well with my own picks, sometimes I go for the player who's heroic because he's a great player in a bad team or a struggling team. So, like, I love Maradona because he picked up an average Naples team and took them to the Serie A title. And I kind of think, when I've thought about, you know, when obviously me and Tom are going to do the review episode as well, but when I think about Gerrard's credentials as the greatest Liverpool player, I'm wondering, is that because he was in a more of a struggling team? Is that why I'm sort of like unconscious bias towards him almost? And like, I think it's weird, but often great players in great teams can get overlooked for this debate. Like, yes, Dalglish was part of an absolute monster of a team, but it shouldn't diminish his own status really in terms of this conversation. So yeah, I think that's a fantastic selection, Izzy, to kick off with.
Thanks, Jack.
Now, I think that Jack obviously touched on it there. The other selection for most people would either be, you know, either Kenny or Stevie. And I think that for us witnessing Stevie when we were growing up, I think he is the, you know, Roy of the Rovers figure really in English football from our era, to pick up the club sort of, you know, quite a low ebb really compared to the years that have gone by. And particularly the trophies such as the Champions League win in 05, pretty much single-handedly with that trophy, he kind of dragged us to that. But does he really command as much? He might do in the future, but does he command as much of that iconic, iconography, if you like, as Kenny does, you think?
I think, like you were saying, he does for our generation, Tom. I think, because like you say, we reflect on 2005 so much, that image of him in that Carlsberg shirt, we all know the one, that face screaming with absolute pleasure, to captain us through a final, win in a CL final, but not an easy win. We were down 3-0 at half-time, and what I would have done to be in that dressing room to hear his speech. And that's why I think he's considered to be one of the greatest Liverpool players, or at least deserves a consideration, because he is captain fantastic. It's not necessarily his ability as the midfielder. The debate was also him, Lampard, etc. at the time for who's the best midfielder. But why he stands out is because his skills as a footballer, yes, they're there, but also his heart, soul, and passion to captain, some not so great Liverpool sides to somehow victories. That's what makes him really stand out.
Yeah, just a special player, I think, in the pantheon of English players. And I think his legend is only going to increase over the years. And I think once the country kind of gets the slip out of its system, I think they will see a guy who was capped over 100 times for his country, didn't win the league with Liverpool but won everything else and dragged the team pretty much to that as well. But I kind of veer a bit like yourself. I think we've had the debate with Joe Rimmer, haven't we, Jack, prior, and he kind of went down the route of Stevie. He kind of witnessed Stevie more so than Kenny, like us. But as a statesman figure at the club, and we had this with the Everton episodes as well, I think that definitely comes into it a little bit, where you're almost picking someone who embodies the club. And I think Kenny possibly, just because of Stevie's age pretty much, and he's not managed the club yet, I'm sure he will at some point, but I think Kenny maybe embodies the club a bit more, I'd say, and I think you're right to kind of point that out.
I agree, and also I think, like you say, it might come with time that Stevie's legacy is more enriched, perhaps. But also, like I mentioned, Dalglish had that player-manager phase and did so much more in those few years. And maybe this is something that will happen in the future as well with Gerrard. I mean, we've seen him do quite well with Rangers in the manager role. I know so many people at our club, so many fans will want to see him someday come to Liverpool. I mean, there's already been talk about it. He was at the academy for a while before he took the Rangers position. And so many people say after Klopp, it's got to be Stevie. And I don't know whether that's necessarily true. I don't know whether that would be the natural progression. But I do think someday to see Steven Gerrard in that role, it's got to happen. Yeah. And maybe that will just level him up with Dalglish that bit more.
But it can go the other way, like Souness, can't it? And possibly, I don't know whether he'll take Lampard or not, but that's sort of the modern example as well, isn't it, with Lampard recently? What do you think on that?
Well, that's the thing. That's why I say I don't know whether it would be the natural progression for him to take the role immediately after Klopp, because I think ultimately what happened with Lampard is it was too soon. In his career as a manager, and also in the situation that Chelsea forever find themselves in, manager after manager on about an 18-month to 2-year cycle, isn't it, almost? So I think for Lampard, I think it was harsh, and I felt very sad for Lampard and for Chelsea fans, which you will never
I can't believe I
catch me saying. I know, exactly. This might be the one and only time I will ever say it.
We've all mellowed so much over the years, haven't we?
I know.
We've all mellowed so much over the years.
That was surprising.
Lockdown's broken me, that's what it is. But I think it's just because I think for the fans to see someone who for them is a hero, a club hero, fall from grace at their club and how it happened. It's hard to watch. So that's why I say it was too soon for Lampard, and that's why I don't want Stevie to be rushed into that position, because I don't want the same thing and his legacy to be tarnished.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, I think it's a really good point. But what do you think, Lacey, on that as sort of players coming back, and obviously they have that spell sort of at the club, and does it taint what they've done as a player? I mean, there's the example at Newcastle, which I think would be very unfair to use as the stock example with Shearer. Of course, we only had 9 games to go, and I think the team was dead and buried.
We were done, mate.
Miracle, wouldn't it?
We were finished by that point. And I mean, well, but Gary, I all I'll say is I think when we get on to doing the Newcastle episodes, I don't think anyone will be using that as like a counter argument against him is poor managerial spell. And to be fair, Gerrard to Liverpool, at some point it will happen, won't it? Let's be honest, it will definitely happen at some, but it's like, what is it? It's just all about getting the timing right. Lampard didn't have the timing right. Shearer, to be fair, just did it because he loved
Definitely
the club. Just went in and just he had to give it a go because he would regret it if he didn't. But it will happen at some point, and for, I'd like to see him succeed at it, because especially after giving such incredible service to the club and not winning a Premier League, but I think the title win last summer, although he wasn't part of it directly, that'll have probably getting rid of the ghost, I think, a little bit for him, and hopefully if he can do it, if he can have a successful spell as manager, then it'll be interesting to see if, as time goes on, will this debate become closer between Dalglish and Gerrard. But yeah, perhaps we should move on to the cult hero selection, only because this is often the case that this is, by its nature, it's more of a wild card. So I'm interested to see who Izzy's gone for.
Well, Jack, you already know this is the one I found the hardest.
Yeah.
I find it so hard because it is, like you were saying, what is a cult hero? Like, how do you define that? Because, like I said, greatest player for me was Dalglish, and part of that was because he was an icon for the club. But personally, I don't think he's a cult hero, if that makes sense. It's part of it's is it because they weren't very good yet they still somehow endeared themselves to the fans? Was it a specific moment that defined their Liverpool career, or just generally like their work ethic and the fans loved them for that? So in my mind, Dalglish was ruled out for that. So was Fowler and John Barnes, who would have been a close second for me for greatest player, actually. Barnes got they were too good almost. And I'm not saying that a cult hero has to be a bad player, because some of the ones that ran through my mind weren't necessarily bad players, but they weren't spectacular in the way that Dalglish was, for example. So I found it really hard, and I changed my mind several times. My mind ran through so many options. I had the super sub, David Fairclough, was quite iconic
that's
for me.
A cracking shout.
Grobler, obviously, which led to maybe Dudek, and then you got to consider Jimmy Traore.
Why not?
And even at one point,
Jimmy.
This was a real rare one. Craig Bellamy ran through my mind.
Wow,
I loved Bellamy's second spell at
selection,
Liverpool.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I loved him. But I thought at the end, he's not really specifically a Liverpool cult hero. I don't think Bellamy. So that's why I went up. But ultimately, I decided. I think, for me, a cult hero was someone from my era, our era, Tom. Someone who I grew up with, and that's influenced my love of the club and specific memories that I have of football in my childhood. So, I think my answer would definitely be different from my dad and my nana. Their picks would be someone from their eras, I think. And
that's fair enough.
You're gonna kill me because I've still not really chosen.
I like it. I like how much torture this is giving this category. It's
really
great.
hard.
I'm so glad we introduced it.
I had about 3 choices, and I thought I had my pick until we started about 5 minutes ago, and I think I've changed my mind again. So I'll run through the picks, and then I will decide on one. So the first one that came to mind was Luis Garcia. Lucho,
cracking show,
everyone loves him at the club, and sometimes it's not because he was consistently good. He was, not always a starter, had games missed, and sometimes would be off the game. But when he was on his game, he was on. He was the best player out there on the pitch when he was switched on. But really, the main reason he would be a cult hero, I think, is because of defining moment, and we all know it's got to be the ghost goal against Chelsea in that 2005 Champions League semi-final. Plus, he arguably has one of the best songs, the Copper song. Everyone loves the Lewis Gosling song, hands down. So that's
I'll spare you from a rendition this time.
I really thought you two were going to give me a rendition, knowing you both as I did.
That's one for the Patreon subscribers. That's for the subscription service. Lacey,
£2 a month to hear you two.
It's like the bonus edition. And then I also thought my other one was Dirk Kuyt, because again.
Good shout.
Tireless striker, then became a tireless winger. Who didn't love him?
I loved him.
I'm not even a Liverpool fan. There was something about him that I think it's because he reminded me of how I'd like to go about my work on the pitch. Just like, get about, get busy. Get into some tackles. And he wasn't like a prolific goal scorer, was he? But he's a great selection. Sorry.
This is another reason, Lacey. You say he was not a consistent goal scorer, but he always seemed to pop up just when you needed him. Yeah. He loved the goal games against our big rivals. He loved it. And so that's a
Do you remember that dodgy hat-trick against United?
I was going to say that. Yeah,
the hat-trick at Tappan.
The 5-yard hat-trick.
I don't know what year that would have been. I get my years mixed up nowadays.
But I feel like that was in King Kenny's second spell. I feel like
it could have been,
yeah. The short but sweet-ish spell. But also like his work ethic. That man gave 110% every time he was on that pitch. For that, and the fans loved that. It really that's how you endear yourself to an Anfield crowd. Give your all in every game. It was the working man's and woman's hero for that.
Yeah.
But ultimately, so he was, up until about 5 minutes, he was the one I was going with. But finally, I've got to go with, and I think this is maybe a random choice for some people, but it's just because I love him so much. Lucas Leiva.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. Good saving for Liverpool, definitely,
a lot of the time he was absolutely all over the place, But again, a bit like he popped up sometimes when you needed him, and you think, where's he come from? But also, it wasn't a game with Lucas Leiva on the pitch if he didn't get a yellow card, especially within about 4 minutes of him being on the pitch.
It was always that shithouse yellow card on the 88th minute just to see the game out.
Or sometimes he'd be subbed on, and within about 5 minutes he'd be off because he's been red carded.
Rafa's there shaking his head.
Yeah, not again, Lucas, please. But Anfield loved it. They loved him for it because it showed that he genuinely loved playing for Liverpool. He gave so much passion to every performance and every game that he was on that pitch, and the yellow cards reflect that. To me, the yellow cards aren't a reflection of shithousery and bad football. For me, they are actually a testament to passion, and for that reason, he's the key example of born Brazilian, adopted Scouser, and that's why for me, he's my cult hero. So.
I love a few moments of his career that kind of spring to mind, really. The one in his first game where he wins, they drag off Gerrard on the 70th minute, if I remember. And he ends up winning us a penalty through a Phil Neville handball on the goal line, if I recall. And I thought, what kind of player have we? I thought we got a number 10 kind of player, but he certainly didn't turn into that. But it was them kind of moments that were almost misfit about him. But he lasted the course at Liverpool, didn't he? And I think any player that does that, it shows a lot of character, because he didn't start that well, did he? But I think that he worked his way into the team over the years, and I think that by the end he left with a lot of respect off the fans as well.
Yeah, he was a real grafter, I think, and like you say, he did a very decent spell at Liverpool, and throughout it, he always gave his all. He never, it wasn't like he teetered off towards the end of his Liverpool career when the writing was on the wall that he was probably going to leave and things like that. And even now, post Liverpool, he's still a Red. He absolutely loves the club. You can see him on social media, like his Instagram stories and Twitter and stuff. He's always tweeting out support. especially when we were going for the Premier League or Champions League finals. And he was there, Liverpool shirt on. His son is a Liverpool fan. He's got all the kit. Yeah. So true red. It's got to be Lucas.
I love Lucas, yeah. I'm glad you mentioned him, and I think something that ties all them three players together is that they are three people who really bought into the city and Scousers in general. And I remember Dirk Kuyt said that thing after, I think he scored at Old Trafford, didn't he? I'd imagine for Fenerbahce. It could have been back for Feyenoord. I think it was for Fenerbahce, actually. And I think they were singing the old song that they love singing, You Scouse Bastard. And he basically came on the interview afterwards and said, well, I'm proud to be a Scouse in those words as well. Like he didn't kind of mince his words. So I think he's someone who really bought into the sort of humour in the city and that sort of thing. So I think that really ties all three together. So I really like them. So I'd really agree with them suggestions, actually. I think they're really good.
For me, and like I said, they were the players that I grew up watching, predominantly my childhood. And like you say, the fact that they were all bought into the idea of being a Red and being a Scouser, to see that as you're growing up means so much, that these players are really committed to your club. And especially how Liverpool is as a club, and obviously, Jack, I'm not saying no other clubs are the same, but it's growing up as a kid, and Tom, I think you'll agree with me, it's something special. No matter how many times you go to Anfield, every time I get goosebumps when You'll Never Walk Alone is playing, stuff like that. And to be able to recognise that the players on that pitch wearing your shirt feel the same, that really means something. So
the passion's never gone away for me, like yourself. It's every time I step in there, the hairs go up on the back of my neck. Seeing the all red kit, just every time being in there. Yep. And I can't watch videos at the minute of You'll Never Walk Alone. I just can't do it. It makes me honestly makes me really emotional. It's interesting because I think before I'd kind of not been like that as much, and I think it's really brought home to me sort of what we're missing a little bit. And I think definitely, people like to claim it's a cliche, but Liverpool Football Club's a special club. It really is. And I think not just because I grew up supporting them, but just you look at it even sort of with a neutral angle, and everything about the club, it's just so iconic. The Shankly gates, the icons of the club, the all red kit, all the stories behind that. Ian St John, all the stories with Shankly and stuff. You could reel off 10 or 15 stories about every little bit about that football club, and I just think it's a special club. And I think you're right that it's, if you buy into it as a player, that the supporters love you, no matter whether you're a good player, a bad player. I think the players, if they do that, I think the supporters love them forever as well.
Exactly.
It's a special club.
Yeah, I agree.
Absolutely.
I'm getting shivers now just thinking about it, like returning to Anfield.
It's how good is it going to be the first time? I mean, for you two going to Anfield and me going to St James's, how great is that first game back going to be? Like, it's just going to be something else, isn't it? I mean,
yeah, it'll be very, very emotional.
Yeah.
I think you'll have probably 50,000 people crying their eyes out.
I'm
not being dramatic there, by the way.
I was like, is it too emotional for me to say I'm probably going to cry? But you're right, I am going to cry.
I always think I will, and then when I get in there, I never do. It's almost like if you sing You'll Never Walk Alone sitting here, it's not the same as when you're in the... It's almost like aggressive in the ground. I've often described it as. It's almost like a rally cry, but I think if you're sitting here, you get a bit more emotional. So I think actually if I went back there, I probably wouldn't get emotional, because you really want to just force the team on in the game. But
true.
It's a strange one. So I've really enjoyed talking about that anyway. I could go on all day about how much I love the club and all that business.
I think we all
I'm sure Paul Lacey's heard it all before as well from me.
I'm just looking forward to the review episode, mate, when it's just me and you head to head.
You've got to hear all this again.
Yeah. No, it's good. It is actually good to hear, because I think, like we touched on at the start in the sort of preamble, it's like it is what's not the same about it at the moment. So I'm glad. But there were some great cult hero selections, Izzy. I think, Dirk Kuyt, I'd have said would be, from an outsider's perspective, I love him, but I completely get the. It's interesting. They're kind of like sort of quite exotic players who bought into the Liverpool ethos, I suppose. Like that's the running thread of all three selections there. But
sorry, Jack, are you saying we're not exotic?
well,
The Costa del Mar.
I think the traditional roots of the club might be slightly different from the conditions that Lucas and Louis Garcia grew up in. But then again, who am I to judge? I don't know. No, there were great selections. But I'm interested to see as well. I think it's the cult hero is a good one because a lot of people seem to be picking so far. Seem to pick players from their era, Tom. But I guess that makes sense because it's about your personal connection with that player for whatever reason, whether they were great, whether they were average, but just loyal. So it's they made a lot of sense, those choices, and let's move on to to Izzy's greatest Liverpool team.
Right, again a hard one, but I think I've got it down now. So
is this another sort of you're going to be picking as we go along?
No, I promise. I've got these sorted. They're cemented now. So, in goal, I have Grobler. And again, this is kind of because, I picked my team based on some greatest players, and there were like no doubts they've got to be in the team. And then some kind of were cult hero choices as well because memory-making moments. So that's why I've got Grobler in goal because, again, cult hero. That wobbly legs goalkeeping penalty, which set kind of a goalkeeping legacy for the club when Dudek replicated it for 2005. So that's why I've gone to. I know. Some memory-making moments there. So that's why Grobler's in goal. I mean, close, and probably most people would have gone with Ray Clemence, but for me, I thought, no, it's got to be Grobler. I've then got Phil Neal, because you've got to have club record 365 consecutive games on the trot, reliable, consistent, and also kind of brought into this bringing the ball forward, very skillful player that we still see in our fullbacks today in Robertson and Trent. That true. They kickstart a lot of the attacks, bring that momentum forward. So I thought that really buys into the Liverpool ideal. Also, the only person to feature in Liverpool's first 4 European Cup victories, which pretty impressive feat.
There we go.
And also all round 22 medals, 8 league championships, 4 League Cups, and 4 European Cups.
That's just a joke, isn't it? That's just so
no-brainer. It's got to be in there. Then I had Hansen. Again, I feel like that's probably a staple in most people's greatest ever 11. Crazy tackling, but also a great reading of the game. Something like 620 caps, including 8 Premier League titles and 3 European Cups. Captain Liverpool to the first ever double. Just something like a 14-season career, which ended in 1991. So I think he's got to be in there. Again, he's one of those like Dalglish, a legacy player, I'd say.
Yeah, definitely.
I think that I know a lot of people talk about Dalglish leaving, obviously, as we talked about earlier, being a big reason for the sort of early 90s struggles and minor decline. But I actually think Hansen retiring gets overlooked as like a factor in that. I just think he's just one of those irreplaceable dressing room characters that they were always going to struggle to replace him. Great choice.
Like you say, he's another icon, isn't he, really, at the club. Next, I went with VVD, Big Verd. Because I know maybe a controversial one to throw in there because it's a shorter career span, at the club. But I think the impact he's had so far, and most of the success we've had in the past 3 seasons has been down to
absolutely.
Virgil. I think even this season you can see we're struggling without him, and not just his impact is not only missed in defence, but we're also missing him in attack. That's he is a real staple. He's the cement of this team.
Yeah.
Because you can guarantee he's going to be there for defence most of the time. He's that big presence on the pitch in terms of defensive play. But also a lot of our attack relies on a lot of his forward balls, forward thinking and attacking mentality from playing out of the back. But also for the other players, like I said, his presence on the pitch is missed for them because they know normally if he's on the pitch, he's a reliable giant at the back there, which grants them the freedom to move forward the way they do, to constantly press, to do those counter-attacks, knowing that if they lose the ball, Big Virg has got it. He's got it in the back.
Exactly.
So, I mean, first 2 seasons, 2 Champions League finals, okay, we only won 1, but considering the club's history before that, dry spell, and then won a Premier League, he's got to be in there.
Can't falter. Yeah.
I mean, he's the best player in his position in the world and has been for like 2-3 years, I'd say now. So on that basis, I think any club, whether it's Liverpool, Barcelona, Celtic, Arsenal, any of the clubs we cover, in the greatest 11, if you're a player who was or is the best player in the world for like more than a season, I think he's going to be close to anyone's greatest 11.
Exactly, Lacey. And testament to that is being a Ballon d'Or runner-up, which for a defender is so rare, so unheard of. So I think that is a testament to how great he is at the minute.
Yeah.
And I think, again, I'm talking about him in the present, but like with Gerrard, I just think give him some time. In the future, we'll look back and he will be on that list of potential greatest players.
Yeah, no, I agree with. I think it's a great shout. That I think that people shy away a little bit from including contemporary names a little bit, and I think that Van Dijk is definitely, I think, the best defender that I've witnessed, definitely at Liverpool, and he's in the top 2 or 3, I'd say, in the Premier League era that I've been witness to. Possibly, the likes of Ferdinand, Terry, Vidic, he's in that bracket, isn't he? Whether he's better than them or worse, it's up for debate, but he's definitely in that bracket of defenders for sure.
I agree, Tom, definitely. And actually, it's funny you say that, like, people are shying away from picking current picks, because my next one for left back, I was close to picking Robertson, but I actually went with Kennedy, because I think Kennedy's actually the mould of the Robertson we see today, if that makes sense. He has a real knack of scoring decisive goals,
big goals,
that clinch trophies. Yeah, big goals. I mean, 2 Champions League winning goals. I think at Real Madrid in 1981 and the winning penalty against Roma in 1984. So highlights of the career right there. But also, the attitude and sheer determination that he always showed, that's what really made him the player that he was. So he had the skills, he had the talent, but also the determination, which I think we see of a lot today in Robertson. And that's why they were 2 close contenders, but Kennedy's the original, really, isn't he? He's the legend.
Yeah, absolutely.
We'll see, we'll see what Robertson does in the future, if he can be added to the legends list.
I was kind of hoping that Robertson would score in that final against Spurs, because I thought I want another left back to have that sort of pinnacle moment in a European Cup final. But I mean, I'd say Divock Origi scoring the winning goal anyway. But I think So I think that's a great shout at left back.
And then we move on to midfield. Like we said earlier, Gerrard got to be in there.
Yeah.
I don't think I need to explain why.
Straight pick,
Captain, fantastic, He's in there. There was no doubt. Another one again. Like we said earlier, he's kind of a bit tarnished, but when we're just looking at the player, Souness.
Yeah, definitely.
For me, he's the
monster
complete
player.
Midfielder. He is the complete midfielder. You've got classy passing, such a soft, elegant touch, tackling was there, and real domination in the game. When he had the ball, he was dominating. And also, kind of going with Gerrard, cool, controlled captain, I think. So really rounded him off as a pick there.
Yeah.
And finalising our midfield, I mentioned him before, John Barnes for me. And like I said, he was a close second for my greatest ever behind Dalglish. I think he's one of the most exciting players to ever play for Liverpool, which is saying a lot when you think about the history of players we've had at this club. But you think John Barnes and you see him bombing down the flanks, absolute defensive nightmare, such a skilled player. And a lot of people look back and remember John Barnes for being, the skillful player, like I just said, but forget that he was that skillful and that good a player under the racism that he had to endure at the time as a black man playing in English football, which is saying a lot. So what he accomplished in spite of that, I think, makes him an even greater player. Also, gifted English football in general with some amazing rapping skills. So kind of tops him off there.
Again,
quality.
The rendition we'll save for the patrons.
Can't wait for that one. The world in motion.
The bonus
We'll have you do that one.
But I mean, skills both on and off the pitch, really. So no doubt, and John Barnes has got to be a pick there. Moving on, front three. Like I said, Dalglish, obviously, for me, he was my greatest player, so he's got to be in the squad.
Yeah.
Then I've got Rushy up front. Solid.
Yeah, it's got to be, I suppose,
Pure goal machine. I think something like 346 goals, and not just any goals, breathtaking goals, every one of them. 5 league titles, 3 FA Cups, 5 League Cups, and a European Cup. Solid pick. It's got to be Rush.
It's got to be in.
Finally, and this I think is a very controversial pick, but I'm sticking with it. I've gone for Suarez.
Ooh.
I'm with you there. He is the best player I have ever witnessed in a Liverpool shirt.
That's that 13-14 season he was.
Yeah, and again, I think this is probably influenced, like Tom just said, the fact that we witnessed him, like he's our era. I loved the Maverick. Loved him. I mean, controversial with how he left, and obviously there was the whole Patrice Evra situation that went on, and the bite. But I always think about Suarez, and when I do, I can't help but think about what could have been if he'd stayed. Like, what could we have achieved if he'd just given us a season more? He'd taken us to the closest to winning a Premier League that we had been in years, until obviously last year and in the Klopp era. And I think really everyone talks about, Klopp coming and saying, I'm going to change doubters into believers. And I think a lot of that is down to the Klopp mentality and this new wave of Liverpool history. I think we're into a new chapter. But I think Luis Suarez, when you watched him on the pitch, especially during that 13-14 season, I think you look back and that's what kick-started the new belief. At least
The club changed a bit that year, didn't it? In the ground and stuff, where it was almost like we had that belief again. I think we always felt underdogs in the bigger tournaments, the bigger games a little bit. But I think that season we felt we could blow anyone away, and that's never really, other than the year where we had that downturn under Rodgers the next year, that's never really ebbed away. Really, pretty much every season since, we've felt in the bigger games we could win.
I agree, Tom.
That season, sorry, I was going to say, guys, that season he was like. I mean, I suppose when you're an outsider fan, you struggle more with the incidents that Izzy mentioned that were nothing to do with his football ability, but purely on footballing ability, that season he was just untouchable. Like one of the best seasons in Premier League history. There's no doubt if Liverpool had have won that title, I think it's the only other one that would rival it would be Shearer with Blackburn, where it would never be one player making so much of a difference to turning a team from like not being that close really to winning it to winning it, and he missed like the first 6 games I think of that season due to the biting ban. If he plays those 6 games, you win the league at a canter. But I was always more of a fan of Torres personally from an outside perspective, but I can see why Izzy's gone with Suarez. That's not a bad front three either, is it? Dalglish, Rush, Suarez. That's frightening.
I love that gone with the front three as well. Go on.
Well, my decision was I had to when I was thinking about other picks, I was like, I'm going to go with a 4-3-3.
Yeah.
Because that is inspired by the current very great Liverpool team, our 4-3-3 formation. So I was like, I'll stick with that formation and then build my team into that. So that's what influenced it. But like you were saying, Lacey, that season you look back and I look back and see our team, and I was like, "Oh my god!" Like we had Flano and like, the rest. I was like,
Him and Ali Sissoko at the back.
Iago Aspas. How did he ever get that close?
I know.
It's baffling.
Mignolet goal, wasn't he?
We went in with the confidence, like Tom just said. Like for ages, we hadn't had that confidence to go into a big game and think we can win this. We went into every single one that season thinking, yeah, we can win this, and not just win this spectacularly. Every game we almost went in, and it was what Klopp now calls heavy metal football. It was, it was a delight to watch. It was a real delight, and we talked about the bite ban and things like that. But I don't know if any of you have read his book. And he talks about a lot about the psychology and what drove him to bite. Well, both bites actually, I think it was. It is because his determination and his passion to win. Like when he's on that pitch, there is nothing else on his mind but to win a game. And like we were saying before with our cult hero picks, a lot of it is the determination. They might not be the best player, the cult hero picks. Suarez obviously does have the skills to back it up. Yeah. But it's that passion and that hard work that I think really he's an 110% player.
Yeah. I mean, it's that fine balance between genius and madness, really, isn't it? I think with Suarez, and I think obviously he veers into both categories at times, I think, in his career. And it will mar his career a little bit, I think, but yeah, in terms of what we witnessed on the pitch that year, just absolutely phenomenal. And I think other than possibly the Ronaldo season and the Shearer season at Blackburn, I think in terms of an individual display that year, just incredible. I think it's probably in the top 3 of all time in the Premier League. Is that sort of giving us a bit of an insight then into who you're going to pick as manager? 4-3-3.
Yeah, I didn't actually realise I had to do a manager.
To be fair, Izzy, you are the manager really, so it's less of a.
I'm naming Izzy Baldwin as manager.
It's less of a manager. It's more of a someone to just run the line for you while you're doing the gaffering. But yeah.
Yeah, well, I did just say there's not natural progression for Gerrard to take over as Klopp, and there's a real reason behind that.
Yeah.
Because you're looking at the next Liverpool manager.
There we go.
Actually, that's funny little anecdote, not really relevant at all. But my nana was once interviewed for the Lancashire Evening Post. It was one of those little filler things where they're like, "Oh, what's your favourite place to go in Lancashire?" and stuff like that. And one of the questions was, if you could have any job in the world, what job would you do? And she said, "Oh well, I'd quite like to be a florist." And I'm like, "Oh, that's nice." She goes, "Yeah. Or Liverpool manager." At age 85.
That's brilliant.
I was like, fair enough.
The contrast as well. Florist or
Liverpool manager on the weekend.
Yeah, Audrey Baldwin, watch out. So yeah, I think manager one, that is a tough one though, because as you guys know, my dog is called Rafa Benitez, and he's obviously named Rafa Benitez for a reason. And I think again I'm gonna have to go with not necessarily the greatest overall, but greatest for me and the one who's given me most childhood memories, and that is between Rafa obviously and big Jurgi. I think for what he's done for the club after so long, and in terms of, like we just said, turning doubters into believers, this whole new momentum change and the passion he has for a club. Again, I think he'll be one of those, like the cult heroes, that will become, well, he already is, I think, an adopted Scouser. For me, it's got to be Jurgen.
Yeah.
I think his legend is only going to grow and grow, I think, over the years. And I think he is people have often said, this manager's the next Shankly, this manager's the next Shankly. I think he is the closest we've ever had. And I think there will be a point in 20, 30 years' time when people look back and chart back, hopefully, success in the future. And I think the starting point of this new era for Liverpool hopefully will be Jurgen Klopp. So I think, it's a really good pick, that. So yeah, let's go through your team from start to finish then. Bruce Grobbelaar in goal, Phil Neal, Alan Hansen, Virgil van Dijk and Alan Kennedy at the back. Then we've got Steven Gerrard, Graham Souness and John Barnes in midfield. Then we've got Kenny Dalglish, Ian Rush and Luis Suarez up front. So it's
not a bad team. 11, that's a great 11. Can't argue with that.
And Izzy's greatest Liverpool footballer of all time, of course, was Kenny Dalglish. And cult hero was Lucas Leiva. So I think we've had a real plethora of different opinions there today, and I've really enjoyed sort of delving into it with you because it's sort of a contemporary fan's perspective on it as well that I think we've been looking for, haven't we, Lacey?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we've already, this is our second Liverpool recording, and we've already covered quite a bit in terms of the club's history. So yeah, no, good. I think we'll have some tough choices to make, Tom, when we do the review episode. And obviously, as a Liverpool fan yourself, I know you're going to bring your own selections to the party. So yeah, should be interesting. But no, that was great stuff.
Yeah, so thanks a lot to Izzy Baldwin for coming on again. Fabulous appearance. Like we said to Dan, hopefully we can find another reason to get you on because you're always great on the podcast. But that's just about it from me and Jack as well as hosts. But do remember to check us out on Twitter at @goat_podcast_ for a little bit more information about what's coming up. And obviously give us a like and subscribe over on Apple Podcasts as well. But yeah, that's just about it from me and Lacey. And thanks for listening.
Yeah, thanks for listening, guys. Thanks, Izzy.
Thanks, guys.